Jack Walker had always believed that love could overcome anything. When he married Linda, a driven and ambitious marketing executive, he was convinced they were building a life based on mutual respect and admiration. Linda was stunning, the type of woman who could command a room effortlessly, while Jack, with his quiet demeanor and modest job in IT, preferred staying in the background. To the outside world, they seemed like the perfect couple: Linda, the high-achieving professional, and Jack, her steady and reliable partner. But the truth beneath the surface was far from picture-perfect. Over time, Linda's once charming confidence turned into sharp criticism. She began comparing Jack's earnings to those of her colleagues' spouses, frequently questioning why he didn't push harder for promotions. "Jack, why can't you aim higher?" she'd say, her tone teetering between exasperation and disdain. Jack tried to brush off her remarks, but each one chipped away at his self-esteem. He had always been content with his work, priding himself on the stability he provided. But in Linda's eyes, stability was a synonym for stagnation. Their home reflected Linda's expectations rather than Jack's comfort. The sleek, modern furniture, the framed degrees on the wall, and the carefully curated decor were all symbols of her relentless pursuit of excellence. Jack, meanwhile, felt like a stranger in his own house, often retreating to his small study that Linda mockingly referred to as the man cave. It was the only space where he could breathe freely, away from her judgmental gaze. The breaking point came one evening when they hosted a dinner party for Linda's colleagues. Over glasses of expensive wine, one of Linda's coworkers asked Jack about his job. Before he could answer, Linda chimed in, "Jack's in IT, but he's not the ambitious type." Her words, though said with a smile, stung like a slap. The laughter that followed felt like daggers to his pride. Jack forced a smile, pretending not to notice the sympathetic looks cast his way. Later that night, Jack sat alone in his study, replaying the evening in his mind. He thought about how far removed his marriage felt from the dreams he had on their wedding day. Linda's voice echoed in his head, her words a constant reminder of his inadequacies. As much as he wanted to dismiss her remarks, a small voice inside him wondered if she was right. The dinner party had been Linda's idea, a chance to showcase their home and her social connections. As Jack helped her set the table, he marveled at how effortlessly she moved through life, always poised, always confident. But tonight, that confidence felt more like a weapon. Linda's tone was brisk as she instructed Jack on the seating arrangement, her irritation barely concealed. "Try not to be awkward," she muttered under her breath as the doorbell rang. The guests arrived, a mix of Linda's coworkers and a few of her clients. Jack felt out of place among the polished executives and their equally polished spouses. Conversation flowed easily for everyone else, but Jack struggled to contribute. When he finally mustered the courage to share a story about his latest project at work, Linda interrupted, dismissing it as just a minor upgrade. The room erupted in polite laughter, but Jack felt his face burn with humiliation. As the night wore on, Jack noticed how Linda's colleagues seemed to look through him, as if he were merely an accessory to his wife's life. Even when he excused himself to the kitchen, he could hear snippets of conversation that revolved around Linda's achievements and her unwavering standards. The unspoken implication was clear: Jack was not part of the success story she projected. By the time the guests left, Jack was seething with a mixture of anger and shame. 2 days after the dinner party, Jack accidentally overheard Linda on the phone with her best friend, Karen. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the door to their bedroom was slightly ajar. "Karen, I should have married someone with drive," Linda said, her voice tinged with frustration. "Jack's fine, I guess, but he's not the man I imagined myself with. Sometimes I feel like I settled." Those words hit Jack like a freight train. He leaned against the wall, his legs trembling beneath him. For years, he had convinced himself that Linda's criticisms were just her way of pushing him to be better. But now, it was clear, she didn't believe in him. She didn't even respect him. Jack retreated to his study, shutting the door behind him as if trying to block out her voice. He sat in his chair, staring at the blank screen of his computer, his mind racing. How had it come to this? How had the woman he loved turned into his harshest critic? Jack spent the next few days in a haze, the memory of Linda's words replaying endlessly in his mind. At work, he found it nearly impossible to focus. His desk, usually a place of solace, now felt like a prison where every task reminded him of the accusations of mediocrity hurled at him by his wife. Even simple interactions with colleagues felt strained, as if they, too, could sense his insecurities. When he returned home each evening, Linda's indifference compounded his misery. She no longer bothered with pleasantries, merely nodding as he walked through the door. Her disinterest was louder than any words she could have spoken. One evening, while Jack sat at the dinner table staring at his plate, Linda broke the silence with a casual remark, "You should consider a career change, Jack. IT is so pedestrian. Maybe if you tried something more prestigious, people would take you seriously." Her words cut deeply, but Jack said nothing. He merely nodded, his appetite gone. Later, as he lay in bed, he stared at the ceiling and wondered if his life had any meaning beyond being Linda's scapegoat. Was he truly the failure she claimed he was? The thought terrified him. Just when Jack felt he was at his lowest, a small glimmer of hope emerged. During a casual coffee break at work, his colleague Eric mentioned an upcoming company-wide innovation competition. "You should give it a shot, Jack," Eric said, sipping his coffee. "You're good at coming up with practical solutions. This could be your chance to showcase your skills." Jack dismissed the idea at first. Competing meant stepping into the spotlight, something he had always avoided. But that night, as he sat alone in his study, the thought lingered. The competition wasn't just about innovation, it was about proving his worth, not to Linda, but to himself. For years, he had allowed her words to define him, but maybe, just maybe, this was his opportunity to reclaim his identity. The next morning, Jack arrived at work with a renewed sense of purpose. He signed up for the competition, committing himself to developing an idea that could transform the company's efficiency. It was a small step, but for Jack, it felt monumental. Jack poured every ounce of energy into his project. He stayed late at the office, researching and refining his proposal. His idea was simple yet impactful, a streamlined system to integrate client feedback into real-time project updates. It was the kind of practical innovation that could save the company time and money. For the first time in years, Jack felt excited about his work. At home, however, Linda remained unimpressed. She noticed his late hours and dismissed them with a smirk. "Are you trying to be a hero now?" she quipped one evening. "Let me guess, you think this little competition is going to change your life?" Jack didn't respond. He had learned that arguing with Linda only left him more drained. Instead, he channeled his frustration into his work, determined to prove her wrong. As the competition deadline approached, Jack became a fixture at the office. His colleagues noticed the transformation. Eric, in particular, was impressed. "You've got something special here, Jack," he said, reviewing Jack's presentation. "This could really make waves." The encouragement bolstered Jack's confidence, but he knew the real test was yet to come. At home, the divide between Jack and Linda widened. She barely acknowledged his efforts, and when she did, it was with thinly veiled contempt. One evening, after Jack mentioned the competition, Linda rolled her eyes. "You're wasting your time," she said. "Even if you win, it won't change who you are." Jack felt the sting of her words, but he refused to let them deter him. For once, he was fighting for himself. The day of the competition arrived, and Jack stood in the conference room, his heart pounding. The room was filled with executives, including a visiting investor who had expressed interest in the company's future. Jack took a deep breath and began his presentation. Despite a minor technical glitch that disrupted his slideshow, Jack pressed on, explaining his idea with clarity and passion. As he wrapped up, there was a moment of silence before the room erupted in applause. The investor, a sharp-eyed woman named Eleanor, leaned forward and said, "This is exactly the kind of forward thinking we need. I'd like to discuss this further." For the first time in years, Jack felt a surge of pride. He had done it. He had proven himself. Word of Jack's presentation spread quickly throughout the office. Colleagues who had once overlooked him now stopped by his desk to congratulate him. Even Eric, who had initially encouraged him to participate, seemed genuinely impressed. "Looks like you've got a fan in Eleanor," Eric said with a grin. "She doesn't hand out compliments lightly." At home, however, Linda was less enthusiastic. When Jack shared the news of Eleanor's interest, Linda scoffed. "Let me know when it actually leads to something," she said, brushing past him to check her phone. Jack felt a pang of disappointment, but he refused to let her negativity overshadow his success. For the first time, he realized that Linda's opinion no longer held the power it once did. As Jack basked in the newfound recognition at work, he couldn't help but notice changes in Linda. Her sharp comments, once laced with superiority, now carried an undertone of defensiveness. One evening, as he reviewed notes from his meeting with Eleanor, he overheard Linda speaking on the phone in hushed tones. "No, I haven't told him yet," she said, her voice tense. "I'll figure something out. It's just a temporary setback." Curiosity got the better of Jack. Though he felt guilty, he couldn't ignore the clues. After some careful observation, he pieced together the truth: Linda's perfect career was unraveling. She had been demoted at work and was struggling to maintain her facade. Jack felt a mix of emotions, sympathy for her struggles and frustration at her unwillingness to share them. He wondered if her relentless criticism of him had been a way to deflect from her own insecurities. Jack made a decision: he wouldn't confront Linda about her career troubles. Instead, he focused on building his own path. Eleanor's interest in his project grew, and Jack found himself increasingly involved in meetings with top executives. For the first time, he felt like an equal among his peers. He worked tirelessly, fine-tuning his proposal and preparing for its implementation. At home, Linda's behavior became increasingly erratic. She alternated between snapping at Jack and retreating into silence. One night, after a particularly heated argument, Linda accused him of being selfish. "You're so caught up in your little project," she said, her voice trembling. "You don't even notice what's happening around you." Jack wanted to tell her that he had noticed, that he understood her pain, but he held back. He knew she wasn't ready to hear it. Eleanor's confidence in Jack paid off. The company officially approved his project, granting him the resources to lead its development. The announcement was met with applause at a staff meeting, but the real validation came when Eleanor approached Jack afterward. "You've got what it takes, Jack," she said. "I'm excited to see where this goes." Buoyed by her support, Jack returned home that evening feeling invincible. But Linda's icy reception quickly brought him back to reality. "Congratulations," she said flatly when he shared the news. "I hope you enjoy your little victory while it lasts." Her words stung, but Jack chose to focus on the positive. For the first time in years, he felt like he was more than just Linda's shadow. The tension between Jack and Linda reached its peak at a corporate event celebrating the project's success. Linda reluctantly agreed to attend, but her demeanor made it clear she wasn't proud of Jack's achievements. As Jack mingled with colleagues, Linda lingered near the bar, sipping her drink and avoiding conversation. When one of Jack's coworkers approached to congratulate him, Linda couldn't resist making a snide comment. "It's funny," she said with a forced smile, "how much praise you can get for something so basic." The coworker, visibly uncomfortable, quickly excused himself. Jack, overhearing the exchange, felt his face flush with embarrassment. He excused himself from the room, retreating to the restroom to collect his thoughts. Linda's inability to celebrate his success was a wound deeper than he could articulate. Unbeknownst to Linda, Eleanor had overheard her remark. After the event, she pulled Linda aside for a private conversation. "You don't seem very supportive of Jack," Eleanor said, her tone measured but firm. Linda, caught off guard, attempted to brush it off. "It's just a joke," she said. "Jack knows I'm proud of him." But Eleanor wasn't convinced. "Jack has potential," she said, "more than you realize. You should be his biggest cheerleader, not his biggest critic." The words lingered with Linda long after the event ended. For the first time, she began to question whether her treatment of Jack was driven by his shortcomings or her own. Jack's project launched successfully, garnering widespread praise from both clients and colleagues. His name began circulating in professional circles, and offers from other companies started trickling in. Though he appreciated the recognition, Jack's focus remained on his current role. He wanted to see his project through and ensure its long-term impact. At home, Linda's demeanor began to shift. She was quieter, more contemplative, but still distant. One evening, as Jack prepared dinner, Linda approached him hesitantly. "I heard about your project," she said, her voice softer than usual. "It's impressive." Jack nodded, unsure how to respond. For the first time, he sensed that Linda was grappling with her own feelings of inadequacy. Feeling emboldened by his success, Jack suggested a trial separation. "I think we both need time to figure out what we want," he said, his tone calm but resolute. Linda stared at him, her eyes wide with shock. "You can't be serious," she said. But Jack was serious. He had spent too many years trying to meet Linda's impossible standards, and now he needed to prioritize his own happiness. The separation was difficult for both of them. Jack moved into a small apartment near his office, while Linda stayed in their home. Without Jack's steady presence, Linda began to feel the weight of her own choices. She realized how much she had relied on him, not just for support, but for stability. In the weeks that followed, Jack thrived in his new environment. He threw himself into his work, finding joy in the freedom to focus on his goals without the constant shadow of Linda's criticism. Meanwhile, Linda struggled with loneliness. She reached out to friends, but their support felt hollow compared to the steady companionship Jack had always provided. One evening, Linda called Jack, her voice trembling. "I miss you," she said. Jack listened, his heart heavy. He missed her too, but he wasn't ready to return to the life they had before. "We both need more time," he said gently. Linda hung up, feeling more alone than ever. The silence in their home was deafening without Jack's presence. Linda, once so sure of her own superiority, found herself questioning everything. She spent hours replaying their marriage in her mind, dissecting the moments she had belittled him, the times she had dismissed his dreams as insignificant. For the first time, she realized how much she had projected her fears onto Jack. Her own career troubles had been mounting for years. She had worked tirelessly to climb the corporate ladder, yet every rung came with more pressure, more scrutiny. Jack's steady demeanor had once been her anchor, a quiet reminder that life wasn't always about the next achievement. But in her frustration, she had turned him into her scapegoat, blaming him for her own dissatisfaction. One evening, Linda sat at the dining table, staring at the empty seat where Jack used to sit. She thought about the nights they had laughed over cheap wine, the mornings they had lingered over coffee. Those moments felt like a lifetime ago. For the first time in years, Linda allowed herself to cry, her tears falling silently as the weight of her mistakes settled over her. Jack, on the other hand, was flourishing. His project's success had opened doors he never imagined. He was invited to speak at conferences, his name appearing in industry publications. With Eleanor's guidance, Jack had become a respected figure in his field. He no longer felt like the man Linda had ridiculed. He was confident, capable, and proud of his achievements. But even in the midst of his success, Jack couldn't ignore the pangs of loneliness. He missed Linda's laugh, the way she used to hum while cooking, the way she always remembered the little things he liked. Yet, he also remembered the harsh words, the constant criticism that had driven a wedge between them. Jack wondered if they could ever find their way back to each other, or if they even should. Months into their separation, Jack and Linda crossed paths unexpectedly at a mutual friend's wedding. Linda looked different, tired, yes, but also softer, as if some of her edges had been smoothed away. Jack approached her cautiously, unsure of how she would react. To his surprise, Linda greeted him with a tentative smile. As the evening progressed, they found themselves seated at the same table. The conversation was awkward at first, filled with polite small talk. But as the night wore on, the barriers between them began to crumble. Linda confessed her struggles at work, her insecurities, and the regret she felt for how she had treated Jack. "I didn't know how to handle my own failures," she admitted. "So I made you the target." Jack listened quietly, his emotions a mix of anger, sadness, and understanding. "I think we both have a lot to learn about ourselves," he said finally. "But I appreciate you saying that." The encounter at the wedding marked a turning point. Linda began reaching out to Jack, not with accusations or demands, but with genuine apologies. She sent him a handwritten letter, something she hadn't done in years, detailing her regrets and her hopes for their future. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she wrote, "but I want you to know that I'm working to become a better person, whether or not we ever reconcile." Jack read the letter multiple times, his emotions swirling. He had waited years to hear Linda acknowledge the pain she had caused, but now that she had, he wasn't sure what to do with it. Forgiveness was a process, and Jack wasn't sure if he was ready to take that step. Linda's efforts to repair their relationship continued. She began attending therapy, working through the insecurities that had driven her need to control and criticize. She invited Jack to join her for a session, hoping they could begin to rebuild their connection. Jack hesitated but eventually agreed. In the safe space of the therapist's office, they confronted the wounds they had inflicted on each other. Linda acknowledged her role in undermining Jack's confidence, while Jack admitted that his passivity had allowed her behavior to go unchecked. It was a painful but necessary conversation, one that left them both emotionally drained yet strangely hopeful. Jack was invited to deliver a keynote speech at an industry gala. The event was a celebration of innovation, and Jack's project was one of the highlights. Linda, hearing about the event through a mutual friend, decided to attend uninvited. She stood at the back of the room, watching as Jack took the stage, his confidence radiating with every word. As Jack spoke about his journey, he paused to reflect on the personal challenges he had overcome. "I owe my success to the lessons I've learned, not just from my achievements, but from the people who've pushed me to grow, even when it was painful." His words weren't directed at Linda, but she felt them deeply. For the first time, she saw the man Jack had become, a man she had underestimated for far too long. After the gala, Jack stayed to mingle with attendees, receiving congratulations and inquiries about his project. Linda lingered in the background, observing him with a mix of pride and apprehension. She had rarely seen him this confident, commanding attention with ease. For years, she had assumed Jack lacked ambition, but tonight she saw him for who he truly was, a man of quiet determination and substance. When the crowd around him thinned, Linda finally approached. Jack was surprised but composed, his expression neutral. "You were incredible tonight," she said softly. "Watching you, I realized how wrong I've been about you." Jack nodded, acknowledging her words but unsure how to respond. He still carried the weight of her past criticisms and wasn't ready to let them go. They sat together at an empty table, the hum of the event fading into the background. Linda spoke first, her voice trembling. "Jack, I've spent so much time tearing you down because I couldn't face my own insecurities. You didn't deserve that. I'm sorry." Jack looked at her, his emotions swirling. "I appreciate your apology," he said. "But I need to know, are you saying this because you want to fix things, or because you feel guilty?" Linda hesitated, then replied with a clarity he hadn't expected. "Both. I want to fix this because I finally see your worth, and I see mine, too." Jack needed time to process. Linda's words were sincere, but the scars of their marriage couldn't be healed overnight. He sought advice from those he trusted, including Eleanor. Over coffee, he laid out his doubts and fears. "What if we go back to the way things were?" he asked. Eleanor, ever pragmatic, replied, "Relationships are about growth, Jack. If both of you are committed to changing, then it's worth trying. But only if you truly believe in her sincerity." Jack reflected deeply before inviting Linda to dinner. They met at a quiet restaurant, a neutral space where neither felt the weight of their shared past. Linda arrived early, her nervous energy palpable. When Jack joined her, he wasted no time getting to the point. "If we're going to try again," he began, "there need to be boundaries, real ones. We respect each other's dreams, we communicate honestly, and if either of us falls back into old habits, we agree to walk away. No blame, no bitterness." Linda nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "Agreed," she said. "But I want you to know, Jack, I'm not the same person I was. I've started therapy, and I'm working to rebuild my own confidence. I don't want to hold you back anymore. I want to be someone who lifts you up." Jack was moved by her honesty but remained cautious. "This is a process," he said. "We'll take it one step at a time." The journey to rebuild their relationship was anything but linear. Jack and Linda faced moments of doubt and frustration, but they approached each challenge with a renewed commitment to honesty and growth. They began by setting small goals, having weekly check-ins to discuss their feelings, sharing their schedules to support each other's work, and attending a few therapy sessions together. One evening, as they walked through a park near Linda's office, she confessed, "It's hard not to slip back into old habits. Sometimes I catch myself wanting to criticize, but then I stop and ask why I feel that way. Most of the time, it's my own insecurity talking." Jack appreciated her candor, knowing how much effort it took for her to admit her flaws. "I notice the changes," he said. "It's not perfect, but it's better. And that means a lot." They began rediscovering the things that had drawn them together in the first place. Cooking dinner together became a cherished ritual, filled with laughter and shared stories about their days. Jack found himself smiling more often, feeling a warmth that had been missing for years. Linda, too, felt lighter, as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in a long time, they were partners, not adversaries. With their relationship on steadier ground, Jack and Linda decided to revisit the goals they had abandoned during the tumultuous years. Jack, now a respected figure in his industry, encouraged Linda to explore her passions beyond corporate success. Linda, inspired by Jack's journey, enrolled in a professional development course, hoping to pivot her career towards something more fulfilling. Their conversations became deeper, filled with dreams and possibilities. One night, as they sat on the couch with cups of tea, Linda asked, "Do you ever wonder what we could have been if we'd supported each other from the start?" Jack considered the question before replying, "I think we're learning that now. Maybe we needed to fall apart to figure out how to truly be together." Months passed, and the changes in their relationship became evident to those around them. Friends who had once witnessed their strained interactions now remarked on their warmth and ease with each other. Jack's colleagues noticed a renewed energy in him, while Linda's friends admired her openness and vulnerability. Linda, now pursuing a new career path, found joy in helping others navigate their own challenges. Jack, meanwhile, continued to excel at work, but he no longer defined himself solely by his achievements. Together, they celebrated each other's victories, no matter how small. One evening, as they toasted to Linda's first client in her new role, Jack said, "This feels like the start of something good." Linda smiled, her eyes bright with hope. "It is," she replied. Jack and Linda's life wasn't perfect, but it was real. They learned to navigate disagreements with empathy, acknowledging their flaws while striving to be better. They made time for each other, ensuring that their relationship remained a priority despite the demands of their individual careers. One weekend, they took a trip to a quiet cabin in the mountains, a retreat from the world. As they sat by the fire, reminiscing about their journey, Linda said, "I'm proud of us, Jack. Not just for rebuilding what we had, but for creating something new." Jack took her hand, his heart full. "Me too," he said. "This feels right." Years later, as Jack and Linda looked back on their journey, they marveled at how far they had come. Their relationship was no longer defined by criticism or resentment but by mutual respect and love. They had both grown into better versions of themselves, and their bond was stronger for it. The story of Jack and Linda wasn't one of perfection, but of perseverance. They had faced their flaws, embraced their growth, and chosen to move forward together. And in doing so, they discovered that the greatest success wasn't in achieving individual goals, but in building a life that celebrated their shared dreams.